I'm Tass Mellis of The Starters.
This is Ben Golliver with the Open Floor Podcast.
Hi, I'm Kristen Ludlow from NBA Inside Stuff.
I'm OG Anunoby of the Toronto Raptors.
Hey, I'm Elena Donard, and welcome to the Double Clutch.
Double Clutch.
Double Clutch. Double Clutch.
Double Clutch Podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to the Double Clutch Podcast. The eagle-eyed, or those with the ears of something really good at hearing, may notice that I am not, in fact, Mike Miller, and for that, I can only apologise. I am New York Nick Whitfield, and tonight I am joined by, on the far side, an all-time bedmaker, a trade machine savant, and part-time Robbie Williams impersonator. It's Tom, Hall of Fame.
Thanks for that intro. How are you doing, Nick?
Good, thank you. And my other co-host today is hailing from parts unknown. A man some have speculated enters all professional Zoom calls to the theme music of WWE legend Shawn Michaels' Sexy Boy, and that he can only express love through the medium of Bitcoin mining. I'm joined by Josh Coyne.
I mean, that I can confirm that all to be true. Hello, Nick. Hello, basketball friends. And thanks for the memories, Dustin Diamond.
It was big news. Maybe we'll come back to that one. If you are not already following us on our social channels, you can find us at Double Clutch UK. We're on everywhere you expect to find us. Do please check out our Discord server. It's discord.me/Double Clutch. And if you're not already following or watching us on Twitch, hello to everyone this evening. You can find us at twitch.tv/Double Clutch UK. And I'm going to start with a question, guys, that I think needs to be asked more in our current scenario of how are you?
Do you want to go first, Tom?
Yeah, doing okay, all things considered. Work's work. No one's enjoying anything at the moment, but it's that point, isn't it, of we've been in lockdown for so long and we're starting to see the other side, but we're not quite at the point yet where we can still do anything. So I feel like we should be hopeful and we should be getting to the top of the hill and looking at where we're going to go. But actually, things are still pretty naff at the moment. So it's a pretty strange place to be. Josh, how about you?
I'm doing okay. Like everyone, I'm missing some... I learned a phrase via TikTok earlier today, which was novel stimuli, basically meaning I've got nothing new going on my everyday routine. So every time there's a good basketball game to watch, it's a really much welcome treat. Nick, how are you? That's that's important too.
I'm okay. I feel like it's a so near and yet so far scenario where it feels like we're making good progress with numbers obviously going in the right direction when it comes to cases. The vaccination is being rolled out. We're tantalizingly close to more normality, which I personally fear in all scenarios, but we're not quite there yet. But regardless, we soldier on. And I'm going to start today. I've introduced, we're going to see some traditional flavors of the podcast today, but also some new ones. And we're going to start with something new. I think we can all agree that we're not enjoying watching Bradley Beal play for these Washington Wizards. Last night aside, they obviously had a great win over Brooklyn. Russell Westbrook proving some doubters wrong, but Bradley Beal still doesn't look particularly happy in Washington. And this section is called Beal or No Beal. You may guess I'm drawing inspiration from one of Britain's greatest exports of all time. It is, of course, Deal or No Deal. So what I've asked the gents to provide us with today is proposals, as though they are the banker, that we will analyse from both sides in terms of the Wizards and the other teams they're including, and decide collectively whether we think that is a Beal or No Beal scenario. So, guys, what have you got for me?
I think, sorry, Joseph, just to preface anything that we go for, it's important to understand the context of Drew Holiday, who's nowhere near Beal's level, got 2 firsts and 2 swaps, and Harden got 4 firsts and 4 swaps as well, but is a bit older. So that kind of sets the precedent for where we're going to go with the level of these trades. Having said that, Josh.
Yeah, I think I should go first because I know what you're like with these, Tom, where you will, you've probably got a massive folder to pull out when it comes to your potential deals. But I've got one, simply one that I think works for both parties, the one that I thought made most sense. And that for me is the Denver Nuggets receiving Bradley Beal create a backcourt of Beal and Jamal Murray with a potential MVP candidate in Nikola Jokic, they would officially enter contender mode for me at that point. And on the other side, the Wizards in this potential deal would receive highly touted, much debated Michael Antivax Jr., Gary Harris. That would be tough to see him go, because he's a real talent and his injury may affect it. And then a pick or two, depending on the asking price. And then you may have to throw an extra body in there like Monte Morris. But for both sides, Nuggets still have enough talent to really make those sacrifices. We've still got some guys who have high upside like Bol, so it wouldn't be completely hemorrhaging the future for the sake of Beal, and it would be making it one hell of a trio. And then I think from a Wizards point of view, you'd be getting enough talent to kind of roll the dice with.
What's your reaction to that, Tom?
Yeah, I think Denver are the team where they make the most sense for their timeline matches up perfectly with Beal. They've got Jokic and Murray who are kind of ready to make a push now. There's a lot of these other teams where we're going to suggest trades and you start on a new one because really Beal's 27, he's in the prime of his career. And I mean, just the ones that I'm looking down, you've got Miami, Atlanta, New Orleans. Like, they will become a lot more competitive with Beal, no doubt. But actually, Denver are the ones where they're ready to make a title push, and he could take them from just being really good in the playoffs to actual title contenders. So I like that for Denver.
So if I'm reading you correctly, Tom, you're saying Beal to that one?
Yeah, I would go Beal to that.
Okay, and I'm going to put my cards on the table here in that my proposed trade was essentially the same as Josh's. So it's also a Beal for me. So I remember actually recording a Double Clutch podcast about 2 years ago, and I was making the point that I felt like Denver needed to consolidate the assets they have in their playing squad, in that there's a lot of guys on that team, I think, who are capable of more potentially, but obviously they can only play all of them so many minutes. So I've kind of felt like that for a while, that they needed to cash in and that the right player may come along. And I actually feel like Beal is a perfect fit for those guys. So I'm all in on Bradley Beal to Denver. But
Nick, it was a pleasure doing Bealsness with you.
But we're not done. I know Tom's put a lot of effort in. Convince us otherwise, Tom. What else have you got?
Well, how long have you got? That's a question. I'm going to go.
Give us your favoured ones.
My favourite one is probably the most unlikely one. And this is a 4-teamer that I just had too much fun with. And it was something that I did on 2K as well. Because I was thinking, let's go to OKC. They've got so many picks. They don't know what to do with it. Why not clear house and start afresh and actually go for it right now? So here's the trade, right? 4 teams. It's between the Thunder, the Wizards, the Pacers, and the Kings. I'm just going to say what's incoming, and then you can figure out who sent what afterwards. So
Has
the Thunder get
an abacus available.
the Thunder get Bradley Beal and Miles Turner, so they can make a push next year with them guys and Shea. The Wizards get Al Horford, Pokusevski, Baisley, and 4 first-round picks, all from OKC. The Pacers get Ariza, Diallo, Troy Brown, Rashawn Holmes, and 1 first-rounder from the Thunder. And the Kings get Jerome Robinson and 1 first-round pick. Who says no? If you've got any, if you can remember what any team's got.
Yeah, what did you say the Kings were giving up?
So the Kings just give up Rashawn Holmes and get Jerome Robinson and a first-rounder.
Yeah, so they don't say no to that. But Beal ends up in
OKC.
in OKC. So essentially,
Beal probably says no.
If you think about Oklahoma and obviously, the absolute wealth of assets that they've managed to accumulate, these are the kind of trades where you think this is where you unlock the treasure chest. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't absolutely hate it. What did you say the Wizards were getting?
So the Wizards get Al Horford, Darius Baisley, Pokusevski, and 4 first-rounders.
I mean, when you let go of a star, the general idea is that you need, if you're turning your back on win now mode, the idea is you enter this new stage, and what you need then is a wealth of assets. You know what, Tom Hall, I admire you.
Wow.
I really appreciate that. I'm going to deal with that, Nick.
That's huge.
I was fully prepared to deny it on behalf of the Pacers, and then you threw in Rashawn Holmes at the end, who I am a weirdly big fan of. So I think, I can see that working for all sides as well. I'm gonna throw Beal in there as well. Hit us with one more, Tom.
Nice. My other one, and I'll try and do a more realistic one, but it's still a multi-team trade. This is for Philly, who will end up with Bradley Beal and Kyle Lowry. Toronto gets Tyrese Maxey, Thibault, Mike Scott, and Davis Bertans. And Washington gets Ben Simmons, Danny Green, and two Philly firsts and one protected Toronto first.
I'm so bad at keeping up with this stuff. But
Yeah.
what landed in Toronto again?
So Toronto got Maxey, Thibault, Scott, and Bertans.
Yeah, that kind of falls in the timeline as well, doesn't it? I'll tell you what.
Give me a GM job. Anyone listening?
For me, I wasn't adverse to any of it, but I also, none of it particularly excited me. And so those types of things rarely happen in Bradley Beal type deals. So I'm going to say no Beal on that basis.
Oh.
So for me, obviously, you're saying that Toronto, they're turning the corner and kind of they're trying to accelerate usher in the next era, move away from Lowry, and they're going to have Maxey. Sorry, can you remind me who else came in?
Maxey, Thibault, and Bertans.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? And Simmons finds a new spot. We don't have to worry about the Embiid fit.
Yeah, it all works.
Beal. I'm going Beal.
Thank you.
We'll have to agree to disagree on that one. Okay, Bradley Beal, we're moving out of Washington. I think we've firmly established that. But moving on, the next question is going to be a little bit more difficult based on Elliot's ban of some words we're not allowed to say. So I'm going to have to be very clever in how I word this. So this segment is called Where Brooklyn At? And if the numbers are an accurate indicator of the future of this team, they project as an incredibly good, actually an all-time offensive team, and an incredibly bad team at doing the other thing. Where do you think they are in their development towards whatever the final version of this squad can be? Because I think everyone realizes that they're likely to make maybe even significant moves still with that roster. So it's quite early to say, but in your mind, where do you think that team is? And here is the bit that becomes more difficult. You must start your assessment with a summary of your opinion that is also a Biggie Smalls lyric. And I know what you were thinking as I dropped the title of this segment. How is this white middle-class guy from Surrey dropping bars like this? And for that, I can only say we cannot all be living embodiments of urban culture, but give me your take on the Brooklyn Nets, guys.
I'll start, and I'll go as far as Brooklyn go. It's armed and dangerous. Ain't too many can bang with us. They have so much belief in their scoring ability that they're kind of probably leaning too heavily on the outscoring everyone approach. You know, they're hemorrhaging points on the other end of the floor. As many expected they might be because of their limitations in their roster. They're obviously incredible on one end of the floor, but they do have those limitations that people talked about, especially one individual. And the amount of energy used on scoring on that side of the floor can affect your level of intensity on the other end. And they're making avoidable mistakes as well, largely due to somewhat arrogant complacency that comes with being just absolutely unplayable offensively. They're currently on track for having the best offense ever. And what's the best way to say this legally? They are the exact opposite in another aspect of their game. But I think they'll start to kind of balance things out when things start to roll on towards the postseason, because a locked-in version of this starting five can at least hang with a lot of teams. We've seen this before from the likes of Kyrie Irving, where he's really been a serviceable defender when it matters, being able to lock in. Harden's been passable at times on that end of the floor. So I think we're kind of a while off seeing a complete package from this team. And I think that when it really matters, it's going to be a similar thing to the LeBron thing, with a lot of things thrown out the window when it comes down to crunch time, when it comes down to the postseason, and the talent shines through. So I think we're a long way off seeing the complete Brooklyn Nets. And by the way, that song was Notorious Thugs featuring Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Tom, what have you got for us? I know you struggled with a lyric, so just tell us what you got.
My knowledge of hip hop is not up there with either of you two, so I just had to Google some lyrics, and the first one that was slightly relevant was "All I make is a phone call, and you'll disappear by tomorrow." So, and thanks for talking for an extended period, Josh. So now I've only got about 30 seconds until we can say the magic words again. I just think it's been so interesting. Mike tagged me in something between both, where he's been tagging me and stuff when the Nets have been winning or Cleveland have been losing, any kind of takes we've had. And the one from last night was, since Harden joined, they've got an offensive rating of 122.6, which would be the best ever. But then their rating on the other end of the court is 119.9, which will be the worst ever, which is just like so stark. And the net rating would put them like somewhere like 7th, which is pretty good. But then there's the old quote of defense wins championships.
Oh no!
And depending how far you read into that,
You
I read
said
an
that
interesting.
word, Tom.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 17 minutes past. It's okay.
No, he's banned it again.
Oh, you're joking. I'm sorry.
For anyone listening to the podcast, by the way, just to explain this, there's a feature on Twitch where you can ban certain words from being used on the pod, for which you can probably guess, if you're listening, what has been the topic that's been banned.
Yeah.
But the analogy, sorry to cut you off there, Tom, but earlier on I posted a GIF that I thought really embodied the approach so far from the Brooklyn Nets, which was 90s famous British boxer Prince Nassim Hamed, whose approach in the ring was generally to he was a flair boxer. There was very little am I still not allowed to say defense? There was very little. His guard wasn't always. He kind of took pride in not having his guard up. He would use his body to evade punches with flair. I feel that really represents strongly the Brooklyn's approach so far. It's just about how long they can roll with that and kind of stay effective and get the results.
So for how I thought about this was, and the lyrics I chose was Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. When I was dead broke, man, I couldn't picture this, because my take on, which is from Juicy, obviously, when I think of the Nets, they have 3 of the best players in the NBA, and they've only just started playing together. I think any big doomy predictions are kind of misplaced at this point. People are still finding their roles. That if you watch the games, are still like some of them missing occasionally, so they're still finding chemistry. I just think like when you've got that amount of talent wins in the end. So I will fully expect this team to, I think, let me put it this way. I think the offensive rating is more indicative of what the final version of this team looks like than the other one.
Yeah, I just worry, and I know I've said this before, but you're asking KD to do a lot on the back end of the court when you've not got the ball, because he's going to have to guard the other team's
that is
best
assuming
player
they don't acquire better players who stop other players from scoring.
But then there's not many of those out there, not the tall ones. Anyway, I don't know why I'm using basic terms.
This is like it's become like an entry-level basketball podcast. This rule is really making us sound like we've never watched the game before.
Yeah.
Right. And on that basis, I think we should move on.
Okay.
This segment is called Should We Be Worried Yet? and I don't want to spend too long on this, but I'm going to throw some teams at you, and I want you to tell me 20 games into the season, should we be worried about these teams? So the first one, the Miami Heat.
No, because of Spo. I think we all know how good Spo is when it matters. They're only 7-12, so they're 5 games off 500. They did overachieve last year. I think getting to the finals, I think they've got a lot of people thinking that they are contenders like this year and for the next few years. I think they're close. I don't think they're up there with a lot of the teams in the East. But I think they should be a playoff team by the end of it. So I wouldn't be worried about them yet. I think they'll pull it back.
It's a yes and a no for me. I mean, not particularly terrified, but disappointed with where they're at this point. So nervous maybe, but not terrified. It's a yes and no. The season so far makes you think that it's been a bit. Perhaps it was a bit of a perfect storm for them in the bubble, but they've also had significant time without Jimmy Butler, who is very important to them, and he's lost an entire stone through illness. COVID's very serious. Take it seriously, guys. So that can't be underplayed. I mean, the guy is literally a stone lighter, and his physical impact on the game is a big part of their success. So let's wait and see. Let's not get carried away with the Miami Heat.
Personally, I think it's a bit of a qualified yes and no, and I think it depends how you interpreted last season as to whether they overachieved by getting to the finals or not. In terms of, I feel like that may have set some false expectations for what they were likely to do this season. But with the reality check of them not necessarily really being one of the favourites in the East, they're probably fine.
Mm-hmm. We discussed this before we started the podcast, but because Mike's not here, we can talk football. It reminds me a little bit of when Leicester won the league. I know that they obviously got over the hill and Miami didn't. But when I live in Leicestershire, I'm around Leicestershire anyway, and a lot of Leicester fans did get carried away, and the expectation went way too high. It got to a point where they thought they were kind of perennial contenders. Most people knew that was the perfect situation for them to compete. Most top kind of traditional top 6 teams were having a bit of a down year in the world of the Premier League at that point. So I think Miami Heat have a kind of similar situation where the bubble scenario has created an unfair expectation, and now they're kind of trying to tamper them and just trying to be kind of a competitive Eastern Conference team now.
Okay, next up we have the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, I would be a bit worried about these, but I also think that expectations were too high, and that's why. Because I think people wanted to come in off what has been an amazing start to Luka's career and say Luka's going to be up there for MVP this year, which he is, but he's not carrying the team as much as we would like to see him. And I think just having a look down their roster again tonight, like who is their second and third best player? Like Porzingis is probably the second best when he's good and when he's playing, but he's not playing too often. So then you're looking at like Josh Richardson and Tim Hardaway. And if they're your second and third best player, Kleber, who's always underrated by everyone but Mavs fans. If that's the case, you're not going to be challenging in a Western Conference that is absolutely stacked. Or if you are, you better have someone who is out of this world, and Luka's very close. But it's always going to be a challenge for that.
Yeah, I don't think they should be worried. I think they should be deeply, deeply concerned. I think that we're a quarter of the way through the season, and they seem like they've taken a step back. They're not the best offense in history this year, like they were last year. They have a losing record. Their expected MVP, like you said, is doing slightly less at a less efficient rate. Like you said, Tom, Porzingis is down in basically every category, so there's not a feasible sidekick to Doncic that makes any sense. And Porzingis actually arguably making that Knicks trade look very good for New York at this point. And the defensive, is that still banned? Or is that just related to the
Nets?
Nets?
That was just related to the Nets.
Okay, right. The defensive bodies they brought in haven't kind of made the difference that I think that they hoped for. And oh my God, they are worse at rebounding than Britney Spears. The reference there is that Britney Spears went from Justin Timberlake to Fred Durst of Limp Bizkit, and they sit bottom of the league in that respect. They can't rebound. They need serious help on the glass. So yes, be afraid. Be very afraid.
Would you say that Britney Spears, in terms of her marriage and remarriage, just kept on rolling?
All right, partner, keep on rolling, baby.
Okay, Mavs. I'm with Josh on this one. I feel like any time you have a player as good as Luka Doncic playing at the level he plays at consistently, and you're not winning, you need to be worried, because those years can run out. You never know when health issues may occur. Not everyone can be LeBron. Not everyone can play at that kind of level for decades at a time. And you kind of stole the point I was going to make about that Porzingis deal looking pretty sweet for the Knicks right now, with that unrestricted Mavs pick still to come that could even be lottery at this point. And even just to get off the money for Porzingis, who does not look like he's going to stay on the court for any sustained period of time. And even when he's been on the court, he doesn't look like the same guy that we saw for the Knicks in those early seasons, that rim running, shot blocking, shooting kind of unicorn that we thought was going to be that second star for Luka. So it feels like Luka is kind of playing with shooters and floor spacing, but not a huge amount of talent, to be honest. And the Mavs have to be desperately thinking how they get off that Porzingis money for me and how they bring more talent in.
When you said that I stepped on your point, I was worried that you were going to say you were going to mention the Britney Spears thing. So a lot of relief going through my body right now.
Okay, moving on. New Orleans Pelicans.
Yeah, I would be worried about these. Not because of the record, because I don't think they should be trying to compete for everything right now. Because again, it's not on their timeline. They've got so many young players, so many future picks coming up, that now they just don't need to go for it. But I would be concerned because I think Zion is disappointing a lot of people, and he's looking okay on the offensive end, but his effort isn't there on the defensive end. And it's concerning because then you've got to play Steven Adams all the time, who is just there to cover his back, and it makes you a little bit less versatile and also clogs things up for him on the offensive end. So it's a strange one. It's strange. It was strange back in the offseason when they gave Steven Adams that new deal for some extended time. But I'm just concerned more so for his development, someone that was coming in who was going to be the face of the franchise, take on all this responsibility and take him to the next level. Obviously, he still looks really good, but maybe he's not the transcendent player that we're all hoping, or he's just not trying to be at the moment.
Yeah, I certainly had higher hopes for the Pelicans. I was really excited by their core with, combining Zion with Ingram, and I thought Lonzo was going to kind of maximize his potential a lot more effectively. The Pelicans they look like they need the trades that are out there, trades that are being, that they need to balance that squad more. They're having a losing season. I think the only positives that they really have are that at least the franchise are heading towards the avenues of improvement. They're being active on the trade block. They are looking to get a return to help the talent that they do have, the Ingrams and the Williamson, and try and make it that they can maximize their talent. So at least they're looking to get better, which is not always the case in some of these kind of struggling franchises.
Yeah, I think it's a qualified yes for me. As we know, there's no urgency on that team to win necessarily based on the age of their core, but they also have to be wary and they have to make good decisions from here on out, I think, if they're going to turn this into a winning situation. Because I think Steven Adams in particular was a bad decision, not because I don't like him as a player, I just really don't like his fit with Zion. Zion, if he is on your team and he's going to be your focal point, should be almost on the kind of team that Dallas have, where it's just like shooters at every single position, even the rim rollers that aren't Zion. So you kind of like really maximize that usage of him. But playing next to a guy who's they're gonna compete for rebounds, they're gonna what Steven Adams going to do if he's if they're playing 5 out. I just don't really like the fit there. So I wouldn't be desperately worried for them, but I'd be carefully thinking about what the next move is in New Orleans. Okay, Minnesota.
This is the worst that you could possibly hope for them to be. It's just terrible. I'd be very concerned if I was a Minnesota fan. And I just keep thinking and coming back to, we're talking about Beal wanting out. Well, Beal's not even said he wants out. We're all just saying it for him. No one seems to be thinking this about Cat, and I know he's on a long-term deal, but surely he's going to be the guy in the not-too-distant future where we're sitting around saying, where can we send him? We've got to get him off this Timberwolves roster. And then, they have nothing then. So I'd be very concerned if I was one of those guys.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? Because obviously these players need to at least feel as though there is hope of them contending. And it does feel like the Timberwolves are a long way off. I think it's been extremely bleak since, draft day, basically. Not because of draft day, but it just since the start of the season, it's not been positive for them. They're losing a lot of games. They look really bad on both ends of the floor. But unlike some teams, they do have lifelines. I'm trying to be devil's advocate here, trying to be positive for once in my life. And I think one of them is that Anthony Edwards has shown that he's worthy of the starts that he's been getting in the last 2 games. Shown a lot of promise to justify his pick. So, that he could potentially be a star is a possibility. And I think that's a positive and that's a lifeline for them. And then the hope that they do get one of the best big men in the world to come back. Whenever he's ready. He's had a terrible year. No one would ever begrudge him not being there. But if he can come there and start playing at a decent level, who knows? They could massively improve. So at least they have lifelines to hold on to, if not excuses as to why it's been an extremely bleak year. And I wouldn't blame the fans for being extremely worried.
Yeah, for me, it really revolves around Towns. Obviously, he's had a abysmal year for lots of reasons. And so getting a huge performance out of him this year may not be realistic with the personal tragedies he's been through. But the reasons for his potential unhappiness, we don't know that. It's never been reported that necessarily, but you have to think someone as good as that is eventually going to want to win in the NBA. And it wouldn't be weird for him to start questioning whether that's going to happen in Minnesota based on his experience in that city so far. And it's a funny one because I think about him in a similar way to how I think about Anthony Davis, where Davis really didn't do anything to speak of in New Orleans before. Obviously, he put up numbers, but that team really didn't win with him as a focal point. He really needed to be alongside another star like LeBron to see the best version of him as a player and for his impact to really mean that his team wins games. And I think you'd see something with Karl Anthony Towns very similar, where if he played alongside a ball handling, like all NBA style player, we think of him in a different tier of where he sits in the NBA.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that as well is that since Karl Anthony Towns last played an NBA game, there's been a complete shift in the image of big men. There's been a lot of talk, especially the last few weeks, that the big man is back. 3 of the best top 7 players at the moment in the NBA are big men. Teams maybe do have a little bit more hope that they can build around these big stars. And that wasn't the case for the last few years for Karl Anthony Towns. He's their best player, but, why not? Just roll your dice, build a team around him, get that guard who can really make a difference with Karl Anthony Towns, and then maximize the talents of him and Anthony Edwards. We'll see. But all I'm saying is that they now have an excuse to truly believe that they can build a team around Karl Anthony Towns and make it work.
Yeah, just a couple of things to mention before we move on Minnesota. I know Harry Harrison is the only Minnesota fan I've ever known. We'll be sitting listening, shouting at the podcast saying that D'Lo and Russell have played hardly any minutes together at all. So to kind of put a label on what this team is and its totality is premature, probably, without knowing what it looks like with all those guys on the court. And also, one reason for even more concern is that unless it's in the top 3, they don't have their pick this year. It goes to Golden State. So unless they try and be really bad, but even then the odds aren't completely in your favour now they've changed them. They might not even get rewarded with a decent pick at the end of it all.
My goodness, Golden State, what a situation to be in. Wow. But just to clarify something that is being debated on the Twitch, which is, I said 3 of maybe the top 7 guys, best guys in the league are big men. I was including Anthony Davis as well as Jokic and Embiid. There we go.
Also, a side note on Anthony Edwards. I was privy to see his physical measurements ahead of the draft recently, and he was an absolute all-timer in terms of athleticism, in terms of things like deceleration, which is like the trendy metric by which teams monitor, because people like Harden and Doncic have incredible measurements there versus any other. Think everything from like speed and vertical leap. He was like absolutely off the charts in basically everything. So it's good and bad in that if he can make the most of that talent, it's obviously incredible. But the last person I saw who measured that well was Andrew Wiggins, who has not been able to utilize those physical gifts necessarily. So ironic kind of that it was also a Timberwolves draft pick. But anyway, moving on. One quick thing from the Twitch chat. Hicks96 asks, where will JJ Redick end up?
It's a really tough one, isn't it? Because the conversation has become they want someone in the kind of northeast to, one of those teams to be the potential suitor. I don't see it helping Brooklyn that much because we've already talked about what Brooklyn need, and that isn't an old bad defender. So that's out the window for me. And I think when it comes to Boston, they got the trade exception for the sake of being able to add someone who really made sense to their roster. You could say that if you're thinking in a completely win now scenario, then Boston would be a good suitor, but that's based on the historic version of JJ Redick that seems to have disappeared within this young, quick system in New Orleans. And I think that he would have to immediately return to the JJ Redick that we know for it to make sense. And that's a gamble for Boston, especially when this trade exception is an advantage that they can use to get someone that would become available that could really help them and maybe fit their timeline more appropriately. And also that, they sacrificed a lot, as a lot of people keep reminding Boston fans. They sacrificed the ability to get Miles Turner for this trade exception. So do you get something like that with the intention of getting a near retiree who's having the worst season of his career? I'm not sure. So I just talked for a long time and my answer is I don't know.
Tom, if you can give us a quicker answer, I welcome it.
Yeah, like you said, it's completely fallen off a cliff. For me, and I can say it now because we're 1 minute past the ban, he is the personification of the Brooklyn Nets, really, that in theory he could offer loads of offense, which is great, but then come playoff time, he's just going to be the guy that you attack, and he's not going to offer any resistance at all. He's just going to be a complete hole where other teams can penetrate and score. So I don't think he's the kind of guy. I would be so reluctant as a contender to give anything of value up to pick him up. So for me, they can try and flog him to clear some money, but I wouldn't expect a great return for him.
Okay, seems like general consensus is down on JJ. Moving on. Okay, so I am a lifelong Chris Packham fan. You may notice the subject change a little bit here. So this next segment is called Ringwatch, obviously drawing on Springwatch. So as winter turns to spring, I'm sure you're as fascinated as I am in the changing landscape of both the natural world and the NBA. 20 games in, have your views changed towards who the favourites for the title are, based on who you were thinking would be the favourites at the beginning of the year?
Well, maybe I'm going to soften my voice here to go into the nature documentary side of things. I hope you're sitting down. Well, I know you're both sitting down, but whatever you do, I hope it's to be ready for this answer. Right, okay. So are you ready for my answer?
Go on.
Okay, well, no, it hasn't changed. It's still the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm not falling into the trap of suggesting the regular season LeBron matters, and I'm doubling down that they are going to win the title when it matters, because the postseason he just flicks the switch.
Okay, next.
Can I just go with a classic ditto?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair. I think the only thing I would add in my own perspective, and I may be heavily biased by the fact I watched them play the Knicks last night, is I take the Clippers more seriously than I did at the beginning of the year. Not just off the back of that, obviously, but I just think in the games where they are full strength, they look pretty damn good to me. And the combination of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard as defenders means, and we didn't see it last year, I think they match up with the Lakers really well. So in the scenario that were they to meet them in the playoffs, I feel like that would be a really tough series for the Lakers, even though I still think the Lakers are the favourites.
Nick, you've been a basketball fan too long to not to fall into the trap of believing in the Clippers. Come on.
Moving on. Okay, this one may require some explaining, but I'm going to do it. This is titled NBA GameStop. So the news this week has been filled with talk of how some folks from Reddit have been taking on Wall Street hedge funds in deliberately inflating the stock of GameStop, which, if you're not familiar with, is basically the US equivalent of game stores who sell video games. So my question to you is, in NBA terms, what are you seeing that isn't being talked about yet that people should pay attention to? So it could be a specific player or a team, something funny, or just something else. What should we be buying stock in as NBA fans?
Well, I've got some NBA ones, and I've also got just some general life suggestions that we might come to later on, depending on how weird this section gets. My NBA one is, mind you, these are pretty weird anyway. I'll start off with Memphis, which is my probably most normal pick. I think most people thought they did pretty well last year, but didn't have them anywhere near the playoffs this season. And they didn't have a great start. Morant's been out for a bit, but they're quietly fifth in the Western Conference with an 8-6 record. They're going to have Justice Winslow coming back this month sometime. I just think they're a really interesting team, one that a lot of people won't talk about because they're a small market, but could sneak in there without much noise.
I'm going to go for a fairly standard one to start with as well, and that's I'm going back to 2017 and into my deepest emotional chasm for this one, and that's I'm going for Isaiah Thomas's ability to contribute. If somebody runs with Isaiah Thomas, he can offer them a scoring punch. I still believe I would buy stock in him still being able to at least contribute to a decent NBA team. And whilst I'm not going to go for the kind of tiresome mellow Stan thing, I don't appreciate the disrespect. I think people need to put some respect on Isaiah Thomas's name. So I'm saying buy stock in Isaiah. I think the returns will be good if he does get one more shot.
So the interesting thing with IT is that he is likely to be playing for USA in some qualifying games coming up for the America's tournament, the FIBA tournament coming up. So I think teams will get a first-hand look at what he looks like health-wise, so that'll be fun to watch. I have gone for Wayne Ellington as my pick, who no one is watching because he plays for the Detroit Pistons, but this guy can flat out shoot the ball. He's currently shooting over 50% on over 6 attempts per game and is not on giant money or anything. So if I was a good team looking to add shooting to my team, he is someone who I would be asking questions of the Pistons as to what they wanted in return.
I've seen him shoot the ball. He looks like a really positive piece of the puzzle for Detroit. So I'm totally with you. I'm not sure how much I'd be willing to put on it. Are you kind of a qualified tipster to be able to let me know what I should be investing in Wayne Ellington?
Second rounders. Anything, the Pistons are not going anywhere. We know that. And so they will be tanking already, I'm guessing, at this point. So if they can acquire draft picks, and to be honest, if you're a contending team, I don't think you'd be expecting to get much more for your draft picks than shooting to add to your team anyway. So if that kind of offer was out there, I think that would work for both sides probably.
Good shout.
Okay, so we're coming to, obviously, my favourite part of the podcast, nothing but Nick's silly nonsense.
Sorry, Nick, to interrupt you mid-flow. Do you mind if I just throw in some general life ones there? Because I've got a lot of things here that I feel like are underrated.
He's worked hard on these.
And underappreciated.
Please do.
And I've been thinking I want people to buy stock in these just because they're so underappreciated. The first one is tuna sandwiches with no mayonnaise. My favourite meal of all time, and people get really angry that it doesn't have mayonnaise on.
I am appalled by that. Firstly, I don't particularly like tuna sandwiches, but if I was going to have a tuna sandwich, mayo is absolutely imperative. But I am also a massive advocate for mayonnaise, basically going with anything that you can eat.
Nah.
As someone who does not eat the animals, I also will have to turn that one down, unfortunately.
That's bad. Shortbread is another one. Criminally underrated. Slippers, fluffy socks, the program Recess, and funk music, all for me. Buy the stock in it because it's going to come back.
I really like them, but is shortbread underrated? I don't know. I've never heard anyone slagging shortbread off.
No one slags it off, but it's just like you never think, oh, I'm going to buy shortbread over everything else. But then when you have it, you're like, oh, I should buy shortbread more often.
I'm going to throw it out there. I'm not a fan of it.
Oh,
man,
what is this?
If I was going to eat something unhealthy, I just I'd never choose it.
This is what I'm on about. But then when you have some, the next time you'll have some, you'll think, you know what, Tom was right. I'm going to buy some stock in that. But it'll be too high.
It has got that thing where it kind of congeals in your mouth and makes some kind of really delicious paste. I know that's the most disgusting thing anyone's ever said on a podcast. But I agree. I also agree.
Anyone tuning into the podcast now will be wondering what on earth you were talking about.
I also agree with you on Recess, Tom, but I can't. I mean, unless you've heard otherwise, I can't see it coming back and repaying you. And funk music. Oh my God, what a shout! Do you think that it's got potential massive return?
I think so. There's a few bands out there that are doing it some favours, and so I could see it coming back big time.
Who are you saying? Who are you giving a shout out to? I mean, obviously you've got the likes of Anderson .Paak and
I mean, for me, it's weird funk, but Snarky Puppy. If you've not heard of them, just go on Spotify, type them in, and check out the first few songs. It'll blow your mind.
There we go. Put your money on Snarky Puppy, guys.
Back to basketball.
Kind of. Only kind of basketball still. So as I was getting to, nothing but Nick's silly nonsense. So one of my favourite genres of both movies and video games revolves around surviving a zombie apocalypse. An absolutely essential trope of this genre is the exaggerated personalities that each have distinct specialist skills that form the group of survivors or rise to prominence as villains in these dystopian landscapes. So my question is, if you were tasked with forming an elite 4-person group of survivors from the world of basketball, who are you picking and what is the skill that each offers?
I think...
Who wants to kick us off?
I'm going to go with, and I've tried to make mine very complimentary. So Steph, just because he's got the killer shot. Marcus Smart, because he can defend wherever Steph's trying to shoot from to stop the zombies from getting there. DeAndre Jordan, and this is where I can get the net slander in full flow, because he's the guy that does the classic thing of he looks like a zombie in the way that he's played, so he can try and blend in. And they're not going to think that he's one of the good guys. And then my fourth guy, when it all goes wrong and everybody gets overrun, the guy that's willing to trade all their lives and blow it all up, Sam Hinkie, to start afresh.
Wow.
Nice. Who you got, Josh?
The one that I thought that might have some crossover, I've gone for Steven Adams. He's a Hulk-like action star, Jason Momoa, tough guy, willing to pull his sleeves up and highly likable. Kyle Lowry, because he's a smart guy, very crafty. He's willing to do what it takes to win, much like the style of Ric Flair. And then I've got Dame Lillard for similar reasons that Tom said about Curry. he's a sharpshooter. He's got the ability to come through under pressure. He takes no shit. And yeah, like I said, sharpshooter. And then finally, I know he's not in the league anymore, and I guarantee you could do this 100 times and no one would say this person. But I'm going to go for Festus Ezeli because he was on track to be a doctor if he wasn't to enter the NBA. So, as a positive.
See, that is the kind of thinking that I was hoping for in the segment. So I'm going to run you through my picks. First up, I have Meyers Leonard, who incredible specimen of a man, really good physique. He's in peak physical health. But if you follow him on social media, you will also note that he also spends a significant amount of his time carrying a giant hammer around with him wherever he goes. And if you've seen any zombie movies, you know that ammunition can become scarce. So you always need a melee specialist. So that's why he's made my team. I have Brad Miller, who was a renowned survivalist and outdoorsman who, when we're retreating to the woods, he is the guy who's going to know how to survive. I have Gilbert Arenas, who is essentially a human armory. I read that he once owned over 500 firearms. So not only can we arm ourselves, but we can build a small community and arm everyone just off the back of Gilbert Arenas. And my final pick is Charles Oakley, just because he's simply too tough of a man to ever die. So he is essentially immortal. So that is why I've picked Charles Oakley.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, any final thoughts on any of our picks?
Yes, I have a couple of questions about yours. Firstly, I don't follow him on social media, and I think he's a bit of a numpty, but Meyers Leonard carries a hammer.
Yes, it's like a giant two-handed, incredibly heavy hammer that could really do some damage to zombies.
So, like
Thor style thing.
I believe it's part of like a workout regimen, but also a thing that he thinks just looks cool.
Is it like Triple H sledgehammer style? Right?
Yeah.
So is he prepared for a hardcore match at all time? Is that generally the vibe?
That's what I think so.
Okay, and my next question, sorry, just to dive back into it, is was not a question, but I just wanted to point out that didn't Brad Miller lose a finger?
That's
so
correct.
He's not fully, in terms of his ability to function, he's not fully equipped, much like many NBA guys. But it also does show that he's tough. If you're missing a finger, generally you look at a guy with a missing finger and think, bloody hell, he's been involved in some scrapes.
Maybe you could have gone for the all missing finger team with Gerald Green and Davis Bertans as well, maybe.
Well, yeah, we could have, but I don't know how that would help us. But
just have a nice theme, bring it all together.
Yeah.
You might be asking for it though, because that's a net 3 fingers that you're missing. So,
is that an advanced stat that you can get on cleaning the glass?
Yeah, with the eye on the clock, gents. Let's move on. So, moving on to Talkie on D. So, if we've mentioned our Discord server, do check us out there. Great place for the community to touch base, chat all things basketball and things that came up this week. So, one thing we started talking about actually wanting to play basketball when things get back to normal in person with other human beings closer than 6 feet. And maybe Double Clutch will try and plan something at some point when that sort of behavior is allowed. And we will keep everyone posted if we manage to do that. The other thing is a quick shout out for at NBA Jig, who is expecting a little boy. A new member to the NBA UK community, so huge congratulations to him. Actual name Jamie Gravett, I made a note of just so I didn't have to use his handle only there. And moving on to listener questions. So the first one we had was from Elliot, who said, who's also known as Hoopin' and Luton, obviously, cool jersey store, get your stuff there. Every Nets starter had last night, referring to the 25th of January, every Nets starter had a surname with 6 letters, which is oddly satisfying. What's your pointless OCD satisfying stat? Quickly, gents, give me your answers.
Well, I don't have an OCD stat, but this is just a random quirk that is incredibly satisfying to me. And that's whenever there's a video of two or more players moving in complete sync. I love it when those pop up on the timeline and I become irrationally excited about it.
Nice.
Yeah, I like that. Mine's similar to something that Zach Lowe mentioned on his podcast last week, where all the numbers run consecutively, and the Hornets nearly had it where it went from 0 to 4, but I think they were just one number out. So yeah, that always gets me going.
Gets you.
I love that.
I don't know how to follow up that, but okay, I pulled out some stats, not necessarily super OCD necessarily, but they appeal to my sense of weirdness. So in the 2010-2011 season, Joel Anthony managed to play 29 minutes for the Miami Heat against Portland and not register a single point, rebound, assist, steal, or block. Just zeros completely along the box score, which is frankly astonishing. And I'm a little bit upset. I have never played in an NBA game because I could offer similar production, I believe. So second one is in the 2008-09 season, Jose Calderon shot 151 of 154 free throws for the all-time record at 98.1%, which is frankly almost flawless, which is, I don't even understand how that's possible. And my last one is 2000 to 2001, Rasheed Wallace's 41 technicals in 77 games. Incredible effort.
Incredible. Just to go back to your first one, I can't believe how Joel Anthony, it feels like you'd at least get something on the board even by accident.
You think playing as a big man on a team where your role is to rebound, you may get a single rebound.
Honestly, it's insane. That is incredible.
Okay, next question. Harry Harrison. Now that the Hornets have LaMelo Ball, have they shaken that image of being the league's most irrelevant team? If so, who now holds the title?
I really want to go straight in with Timberwolves just because it's Harry. They're very close.
I think that's why he was asking.
Yeah, it's like, please say someone else. I am going to go with Detroit, I think, in their place. Detroit probably intentionally now just wanting to kind of go by the wayside and not do anything for a year or two and pick up some high draft picks. But the Timberwolves are probably scarily close. So,
yeah, it seems as though Harry might revel in his own pain there because he clearly wanted to hear the answer that wasn't going to satisfy him. They definitely are, for me, the most irrelevant team. But I feel as though that's a really hard question to answer because some organizations are considered less relevant because of maybe they have less history. The newer franchises are considered because they haven't won anything. So, yeah, the Hornets are definitely relevant now is basically the answer. And the Timberwolves are, on court, they're the worst team, so they're less relevant.
I thought about this one slightly differently in some ways, in that I think relevance is a difficult subject. And I think it's difficult to refer to it only at a single point, because I feel like if I use my team, the Knicks, for example, they've been awful for a decade until this season. But playing in a major metropolitan area means even when they're bad, they're not necessarily irrelevant. I mean, they're still the most valuable team according to the projections. So relevance is a tough one it's not just wins and losses. But teams like Sacramento, for example, they're not very good currently, and they've had very few periods outside of the like Chris Webber, Jason Williams era, for example, where they've actually been good. You could even argue that the Clippers outside, it's actually a modern thing that the Clippers are relevant. They've been irrelevant for most of their history. If you go now, I also have to think I like Tom's pick about Detroit, not only because the team is bad, but the actual city of Detroit has a lot of issues itself in terms of very sad demographic and societal issues in terms of all the industry closing down there and stuff. So it's kind of like, it feels like a city and a team not in its best time, not in its heyday. So I think I'll probably go for the Pistons, even though I don't really like calling any team that, because all teams are relevant and have good fan bases. So anyway, Mike Miller's question. On this week's mismatch, Kevin O'Connor and Verno discussed how the nickname game is dead these days. I want to know a collective top 5 nicknames you'd give a particular current day players and why. They can't be existing nickname, so you couldn't just say Greek Freak, but they can replace an existing nickname. No initial or number combos, etc. So I guess he means like AK-47 was for Kirilenko. So I'm going to go first on this one. I'm going to play my Homer card, and I'm going to say Emmanuel Quickly, the human floater, as graphic an image as that is.
Incredible.
I like it.
I know you had some, Josh. Let us know what you got.
Okay, so I've got 4. I didn't manage to think of 5. I'll rattle through them. I went for Peyton Pritchard. It's been a big debate amongst Celtics Twitter and Celtics TV as to what his nickname was going to be when the initial excitement kicked off about him. P Rabbit is what people are trying to push with, but Twitter is pushing back and saying Fast PP, just based on the original name that they had for him. And I prefer Fast PP, but I tried to coin the Pritchuation, which I really like, and no one gave a shit when I posted about it. But I'm going to put myself on the line and say the Pritchuation is the best nickname for Peyton Pritchard. Sticking with the Celtics, I just want JB Smoove to be secured as Jaylen Brown's nickname. He has tried to make juice happen for some reason, but I don't like the OJ links there. So let him universally be recognized forever as JB Smoove, much like one of the greatest comedy actors around. And I want Andrew Wiggins to be known. This is a weird one. I want Andrew Wiggins to be known as OnlyFans, and the reason I want Andrew Wiggins to be known as OnlyFans is based on a previous player in the NBA's nickname, and that was Corey Maggette, who was known by many as Bad Porn. And the reason he was known as Bad Porn was because he put up numbers through lots of penetration, but it never looked good. So, you can make those connections yourself. I just wanted to update, make it more modern and call Andrew Wiggins OnlyFans. I'm sure it's going to kick off. I can already sense Timberwolves, Warriors Twitter going crazy for it. And finally, it's time to start calling Seth Curry Sue. You ask why Sue? Well, a sous chef is the deputy in a kitchen, and I think he's good enough to have a widely recognised nickname, but he's not quite at his brother Chef's level. So, Sue.
Nice. Conscious of time, I'm going to push us forward to games of the week to watch. I've picked Utah at Indiana on Sunday the 7th next week, or at the end of this week, I should say. It's an early tip-off. I like how Utah have looked this year. I really enjoy watching Indiana play. So that's my pick for no other reason than that. How about you guys?
Yeah, I've gone, Josh, Clippers Nets on Wednesday night, 12:30. Just to answer that question that we've been asking a lot, who's going to guard who? How's the defense going to look for the Nets? How much are they going to get battered by the Clippers? So that's my watch.
I chose the exact same game. I think there's just a lot to prove in that game, and I think it's got probably the widest collection of talent, individual talent, maybe outside the Lakers games that you'll find all year. So Nets Clippers for me. And with that, we come to the end of the show. Thank you to everyone for watching live on Twitch and for anyone listening along later. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please do either leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice. And if you have Amazon Prime, you can actually subscribe to the Twitch channel for free. And just to give a shout out to some followers, on Discord, we had A1 Kanate join the Discord server. On Twitch, we've had il_Biondo_8, Frank V76, NBA Jig, and Luke SWFC96. So thank you, guys. That's it from us. But do make sure you come back and join us next week as we head once more back into the metaphorical NBA breach. Any last words from you guys? Just make Pritchuation happen. That's all I ask.
I'll support you, Josh. I'm on that train with you.
Cheers, guys, and see you next week.
So yeah.
I just killed 1 billion zombies.
Yeah, welcome.